common for adult students to have a bit of a struggle when they start learning bar chords. And it makes sense because they're pretty difficult and we've all been there. But then sometimes there's another student who's just a kid and obviously lacking the same kind of strength, but somehow they get the hang of it way faster. And I never really thought about it too much until one day when I was about to correct a young student for doing her bar chords like this. But then I thought, wait, how is she still getting it to sound good? If you try the same thing just as an experiment, doing some bar chords without letting your thumb touch, you'll discover that you can also pull your finger into the strings by pulling your elbow back this way, using your back muscles. So really it's almost like you're pulling your guitar towards yourself when you do a bar. Another thing we can learn from kids is not to get all obsessed over how perfect it sounds. At first it usually sounds like, and then over time we progress to getting more buzzy notes. But in the long run, it's more that you just get through the first 1,000 times or whatever it is. It's better to spend just a minute here and there to perfect the sound of your bar chords. And you can even check one string at a time. But here's the important part. Now you're done practicing that for that day. So now when you go play your music, you don't need to keep stopping and fighting with every bar chord you come across. Now it's time to prioritize not stopping and then just do your best in that context. In a way, it's a little crazy that we usually learn F as our first bar chord because it's the biggest frets. The strings are less pliable near the ends compared to the middle, so it takes a little more force. And the nut is a little higher too, so it's even more challenging. It can be really beneficial to work on that chord shape on higher frets. And some guitars and strings are harder to push down, and others can be easier. And so, for example, you could even learn to do it on ukulele first, and that would give you a good start. Another obvious sounding tip is don't push until you need to. I see many people who have this process of like putting their finger down and then applying pressure and then starting to put the other fingers down, and the whole time they're squeezing. But another way to do it is to teach yourself to just touch the strings with all of your fingers, and then when you're ready, apply force. We seem to naturally use our thumbs to oppose our index finger, and so it's sort of human nature to do a bar like this. But what I propose you can play around with is the idea of slightly shifting the thumb in towards the other fingers, but probably only behind 2 at maximum, or more likely halfway between 1 and 2. People tend to assume that it should be like the exact geometric underbelly of the finger that pushes the strings down. But it's often easier to be a little more rolled over to the side. And this part of your finger is often a little more firm and easier to get a clean sound with. Another misconception is that it seems like common sense that the finger should be as straight as possible. If it was the rare situation where I had to play all 6 strings just with the bar, in that case I would keep my finger pretty straight. But for most bar chords you might actually use, you don't need to keep it as straight as you'd think. And then for 2 or 3 string bars, it's actually way easier if you allow a pretty good bend in this knuckle. With a 5th string root bar chord like this, we really only need to get the 5th and 1st strings sounding clear from the actual bar finger. And so we can allow it to be a little curved, and the notes on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th string will be a little muted. For chords with the root on the 6th string, it's usually the hardest to get the 2nd or 3rd strings to sound clear. Another thing you can experiment with is extending your finger a little extra far, just to see if it helps. And then over time, usually people learn to do it kind of the minimum amount possible. Another thing that can help is to try covering a whole extra string. So if I'm learning this small F shape, which I'll use as an A, then I could try covering 1 or even 2 more strings just to see if it makes it sound more clear more easily.